So I'm told that we are now live on Facebook. My wife just reminded me, sort of asked me, hey, did you post a notification? Yes, this time I did remember to post a notification. So hopefully you guys see that. Hopefully you can use that to join us. If you have not already joined us, all that information is available on Facebook. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, feel free to join us on the Zoom. That way you can hear, you can comment, you can make whatever suggestions and recommendations that you choose to. So, how are you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing fine. I'm especially waiting for our brother Marco to join us because we need to address his topic from last week.
Yes.
Oh, so Nicole just told me that Marco's on Facebook saying he can't join. All right, so no problem, Marco. We will still be going over the topic regarding giving. It is always a relative topic. It is always an important topic. My wife's got something. What's that? Link in the Facebook comments. I will try and do that real quick. All right, so my wife's got that part. A lot of people saying good morning, everybody. Hopefully Marco can get in. Let's see, we got a couple other people. Once we get rolling here, I'll still be admitting people. I'll just be a little bit quieter about it. How about that? So when we talk about giving, that's what we're going to discuss first thing this morning. And depending on how long it takes, that will determine what else we get into. This morning, we're talking about giving. Last week and the week before, we got into some really heavy but necessary topics. We talked about being persecuted for righteousness. Excuse me. We talked about being in a relationship that could be abusive. We even talked about divorce and remarriage, which is a big topic. Now we're going to talk about giving to the Lord. So hopefully you have some scriptures in mind. Hopefully you have some verses that are coming to your mind regarding this idea of giving to the Lord. You guys with me so far? I'm going to take that as a yes. It's okay to be quiet if you don't have anything you want to share. So there's lots of verses. We're going to do Old and New Testament verses regarding giving. There's lots of good information online that talks about giving and how important this is to the Lord. So let's go first to Proverbs. Go all the way back Old Testament. Let's look at Proverbs. I want to draw your attention to Proverbs chapter 19, verse 17. I have it up on my screen, but I want to look in my Bible as well because I find I get more context that way. So we're going for Proverbs chapter 19, verse 17. Proverbs 19:17 says, he who is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward him for what he has done. I want you to think about that. He who is kind to the poor lends to the Lord. How twisted is it? How counterintuitive is it to think that you are loaning something to God? Talk to me about that part before we go any further.
Really, wow, because I know we're told that everything is God. And so it's interesting how the proverb writer takes this approach and shows how important it is to give. And I just kind of shook it.
Okay. Anybody else? What's on your mind when you think about loaning to the Lord?
reminds me of like how when you're a kid you get an allowance from your parents, and then like say you're out shopping one day and the place only uses cash and they don't accept card, and the parents like, here, loan me some money from the child so we can buy this and then I'll pay you back later, even though it was the parents' money to begin with.
Okay, so basically, like if you were able to help your parents out, even though everything they have, I'm sorry, even everything you have basically comes from them, you're able to sort of reverse the roles just a little bit. Is that about right?
Yep.
All right. Anybody else want to weigh in before we continue?
Jonathan, my first thought is how can I loan something that I don't
I think when it comes to so this reminds me of the verse that says, there are treasures aren't on earth, but they're stored in heaven. Wait, just to make sure, can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, man, we hear you.
All right, awesome. So it reminds me of the verse that says when if our treasures shouldn't be stored on earth, but they're stored in heaven. And so by lending our our loans that we you kind of take from the Lord, while we're on earth, God, essentially, when our time is up, when it is time for us to go home, that's when He offers, kind of like like a repayment in a way, but not. I don't want to say repayment as in it's obligatory, but in a sense that you know God sees our reward pretty much is in heaven as opposed to earth is what I'm saying. So God sees the good works that we do, the things that we give on earth or get rewarded in heaven. Essentially, that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, Deanna's on Facebook. My wife was just reminding me of this, that Deanna's on Facebook and she says her first thought is how can she loan something that she doesn't own? Which makes perfect sense. That is a logical way to ask that question. But the things that God has entrusted us with, when we use it for his glory, he takes it personally. He takes it very, very personally. I want to draw your attention now to Matthew chapter 25. You should probably be thinking when you hear Matthew 25, this is towards the end of Jesus' ministry. There are lots of things that are happening in those last few chapters of Matthew as Jesus is looking forward to going to the cross. This is what is on his mind. He has set his sights on Jerusalem and he is headed in that direction. So Matthew 25, Jesus tells a parable that we get a chance to take very literally. We get to take this parable very literal. And I encourage you to take a direct approach of interpretation. Matter of fact, don't interpret it, just obey it. So Matthew chapter 25, I think if you pick it up in verse 31, we're gonna skip around a little bit, but this parable is known as the sheep and the goats. The sheep and the goats. And the context here, for those who may be unfamiliar, is that at the end of time, Jesus will come and judge the world. He will decide who goes to heaven and who goes to hell. And here's an example of how seriously he takes giving. So I wanted to skip around. I ultimately want to get to verse 40, but this parable is so important. It's so powerful. And I need to be reminded of it. And perhaps you need to be reminded of it. So this is what we're going to discuss. I'll pick it up in verse 31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates sheep from goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. How practical is each and every one of these steps? There doesn't seem to be anything religious about it. No mention of church service. No mention of how many Bible verses you memorize. No mention of your education. No mention of how much money you made. No mention of how pretty you were. No mention of how popular you were. None of the things that we hold in high regard, religious people or non-religious people, this is extremely practical. Jesus is saying, I was in this situation, and here's what you did for me. We're talking about giving this morning. Watch this. Verse 37. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? Now, this is also a very valid question, because these are regular people, you and me. These are people. Jesus is saying, when I was in this situation, you took care of me. You did these things for me. And they're like, when did we see you in that situation? And I want you to put yourself in this mindset, because this Bible verse is 100% applicable to you and me. You right now, as you're watching on the Zoom, on Facebook, on YouTube later, when have you seen Jesus hungry? You say, okay, I'm looking for a guy with brown shoulder length hair. He's got a beard. He may or may not have like this kind of glowing halo thing, might be dragging a cross, maybe a purple sash, depending on my particular denomination, may or may not have holes in his hands, depending on this is pre-resurrected Christ versus post-resurrected Christ. I'm not exactly sure. What are you talking about? When did we see you like that? You should ask yourself the same question. When have I seen Jesus in this situation? Because this is the basis for judgment. Here's the answer. And this is where I want to get to. Verse 40. The king will reply, I tell you the truth. Now, let me pause. Can God lie? I need you guys to answer me that question. It's not rhetorical. It's an easy question. It's almost rhetorical, but I want you to say it. Can
No
God lie?
No, sir.
No. God cannot lie. He defines truth. So whatever he says, even if it wasn't that way, it will be that way as soon as he says it. He defines truth. God cannot lie. The king will reply, I tell you the truth. So when someone who can't lie says, I'm telling you the truth, you really need to pay attention. If you're into that old school King James, your translation might say, verily, verily, I say unto thee. When you hear that, like truly, truly, like, whoa, watch out. Someone who can't lie is telling you, like, seriously, I'm telling you the truth. Watch what he says next. He says, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. Now we're talking about giving this morning. What's the basis that he uses for the sheep and the goats, at least in this parable, at least in this particular account?
Giving, helping.
That's
But the
exactly
least
right.
of these, but also the least of these, not just somebody who has everything already.
Okay, now see, there you go, Claire. You now you're meddling. All right, you're saying things that I'm not comfortable with, and I'm feeling attacked. I feel offended by what you just said.
Not about what I said, what Jesus said, brother.
You're gonna play the Jesus card on me. Okay, so let's look at that, because as I look out, so many of us on this call, we are physically blessed. We are financially blessed. Jesus is saying, what you did for the least of these, Now, depending on what type of circles you run in, there's a hierarchy. There's those who are great, there are those who are least. And in our society, if you got money, that makes you better. In our society, if you have education, good looks, athletic ability, or the ability to perform music, dance, some other talent, we elevate you. We pay you more. If you don't have those things, we denigrate. We push you down. We look down our nose on you. And in our society, some of the people who often get looked down on the most are the homeless. I want you to think about this. The homeless are often the least of these. Now, maybe not in your situation. Maybe there will be someone else, maybe at your job, the person who just got hired as an administrative assistant or an intern that's being just a bunch of work dumped on. Maybe that's the person who's the least of these. But you and I ride around, we drive around, we see people who are on the side of the road that don't have some basic necessities that we have. Now, what have we done in the past? We see those people and we think, there goes a bum. There goes a wino, probably on drugs, holding up a cardboard sign, will work for money. Yeah, right, you'll work for money. You just want me to give you money so you can go buy booze or drugs or do something you ought not be doing. You're basically in this situation because it's your own fault. So of course I'm not going to give you money. You're just going to go buy drugs with it. You're just going to go buy alcohol with it. Jesus said, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. Are you willing to risk it? Are you willing to continue to drive past people who tell you they're in need? Are you that convinced they're lying? Are you that convinced that they're not telling the truth and they're going to do something they ought not do and then stand before an almighty king who takes this stuff seriously? Talk to me. How you going to do?
Hey, what's up, brother Jones?
What's up, Marco? Morning.
Good morning, man. Thanks for talking about this topic. It's very important to me because, even from the beginning, where we're looking at Cain and Abel, we see how God takes giving very seriously. Especially, I in my opinion, the giving, the worship and giving, when it comes to giving to Him, as an appreciation, giving to others, just like you were talking about Matthew 25. That's a very good point. I'll be honest with you. I used to not struggle with that when I was younger. Shoot, I'd give people rides, and I'll randomly, like, I have no problem, I figured I'd take care. I mean, I can handle myself in a situation.
Yeah, buddy.
But
you can.
but now that I got older and I'm not doing the same things, and I got a family, I start thinking a little bit more, and I'm like, man, this could be a dangerous situation, or should I give this guy, a ride, or I'm trying to build my family wealth. I gotta get better, I do, and I have thought about what those things that you've said. What if I give this guy money, and he goes off and he gets booze? Am I gonna get him? Am I gonna really make a difference, or should I just go and feed him, right away and see, maybe talk to him or something? So yeah, these are it's very important to me. I think how would I do? Is that the question? How would I do if Jesus was to tell me, hey, what's up? Is that
Yeah, like what are you going to be able to say to him? Like how you going to defend that if you don't? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's the truth. You know, you got to do those things. I mean, it's very important. So I mean, you're right. You know, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, man. It's sobering, isn't it? Anybody else
Yeah.
want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, what you said makes it resonates a lot. I find myself oscillating from in between two realms. Sometimes when I'm driving, I have that conviction to stop and speak and buy that person a meal, even if it's just a conversation, because at the end of the day, we treat people like that as subhuman, and to be able to provide for their needs and to speak with them one to one as if they're a creation of God themselves, I think is so important. And then there are other times where it's like I'm being tugged, but it's like just like what you said, man. I don't know what they're gonna do with that money. I don't know what they. Sometimes when I stop, they're not even looking for food. Like, no, I just need a couple dollars for a bus ticket. You need a bus ticket? That's what you need? How'd you get all the way down here? Like, so all of a sudden I'm judging, and there's a lot of judgment coming from me. And there are times where I start with that attitude, and then as I'm driving away, it's like, no, it's not my decision on whether or not what they do with it. It's just the fact that I do something. And so I have to turn around, regardless of how far I traveled, I got to turn around and go back and do what I was called to do. But that is always a struggle. And much like Marco said, when I was younger, I felt a little more invincible. Like, I can handle, if something goes down, I'm ready. I can handle that. But it's almost, now that things have changed, the mindset has changed a little, and I don't necessarily think that's how it should happen. We should still find ways to give and to take care of those who are in need. So,
Excellent point. All right.
And I was even thinking that I wish it's also might be a cultural problem, in the sense of like we are always on the go and rushing, don't have time for nothing, and running late, color people late. Sorry, that's honest. But I wish, sorry, it spoke my head. But I wish we as a nation would give ourselves the opportunity to slow down so we can. Okay, you need a bus ticket, let me go ahead and get it for you. You know what I mean? Like, okay, you need something, let me go ahead and get that food for you, kind of thing. I was just thinking outside the box a little bit.
Okay, that's a good thought. I want to get my baby girl up here who wants to share what God has placed on her heart. Come on in, baby girl, talk to us.
So you were saying, how would I respond if the Lord asked me, well, why didn't you do these things? I would just basically just stutter myself into it, just like kind of sort of, and then I just like grab duct tape and just slap it on my mouth so I won't say anything stupid.
Okay, that's interesting. You're not going to be in that situation because my daughter is a great annoyance. Hold on, let me talk about it. She does not let us pass homeless people. I confess to you, sometimes I think I see them before she does, and I'm like, oh, just don't say nothing, We're just gonna keep going. Daddy, oh no, that person needs help. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're just standing there. Nope. So you guys are saying some of the same things. When we are younger, when you were younger, you felt a bit more invincible. You felt more like, hey, let's do this, whatever. My daughter, she is like, this kind of answers one of the questions that was on Facebook. I think Deanna said, how can you give something that doesn't belong to you? Easy. My daughter does it all the time. Daddy, that person needs money. You should help them. Go give them some money. She's not wrong. She's 100% right. That is the heart of God. That's what we're supposed to be doing. So when we have that right mindset, there's a couple things that we need to talk about. Lots of comments also on Facebook we're going to get into. There is a practicality associated with this as well. You guys who are married now and you have kids, you are rightfully concerned. Well, what happens if something goes left, man? If it's just me and we gotta mix it up, we gotta tussle. I like my chances, but I can't have somebody, you can't grab a hold of my kid and start walking off with her. Like you can't push up on my wife and no, we can't do that. So you have some legitimate concerns. So we got to get practical. We have to look for ways to still serve the Lord outside of our comfort zone. So let me hit some of these topics that have been brought up on Facebook. So Deanna says, I'm not sure I fully understand the question. What if you give and that person does cash and now you are funding a bad habit or something worse? Wouldn't it be better to feed someone who needs a sandwich or provide something other than financial support? Absolutely. That's one of the first ways of doing it. If somebody's saying, hey, I need money for food, and you're not comfortable giving money because you're not certain, are you going to be funding a bad habit or not? Then go buy them some food. Now, sometimes that might mean $5 at McDonald's. Sometimes that might mean $50 in Publix. You ready to do this? They said, hey, I need some money for food. I'll buy you some food. What do you need? I need diapers. I need milk. Okay, well, let's do it. Because you don't know. And this is the question. And it's a cheat question too. I will admit, this is a cheat question and it makes you uncomfortable, just like it makes me uncomfortable. The question is, are you willing to risk it? The chances of them using the money that you give for drugs or for some other bad habit versus standing before Jesus, the King of the universe, saying, well, I didn't do what you said in Matthew chapter 25 because I was pretty sure that guy was going to go buy some beer. So we good? We cool? I ain't risking that. Honestly, and this, bear with me, guys. Because it's easy to become pharisaical. It's easy to become legalistic with this. You can't buy your way into heaven. Let's make sure we know that. You can't donate to the poor and like, okay, Jesus, watch me. All right, I'm giving this dude $5. I expect a $5, voucher in heaven, maybe a $5 jewel, something in my crown when I get there. Now, we gotta have the right heart. And that's a big part of what we're talking about. We're talking about having a heart that is like Jesus. There's other comments. Don Webster says, it says, brothers, does that put a different look on it? Do we treat the poor and weak in a different manner? All right, so Jesus is specifically talking about those who belong to him. So how do you know that the person on the side of the road is not a Christian? Because a lot of times they got a God bless. And when Anastasia twists my arm into rolling up on these dudes, or my wife is like, here, give them this. Now, I'm not a complete jerk. Not a complete jerk. I read the Bible too, and I want to be obedient to the Lord. And I have a heart to also do what God has commanded me to do, a heart to serve others as well. This is kind of a bit of levity, you understand, especially, a little bit of inside joke with my wife and daughter sitting across from me on this. But seriously, there is a very real sense that those who are hurting have some degree of desire to want to be close to the Lord. Because why wouldn't they? They don't have the basic things to distract them. They're depending on forces greater than they are. So it makes sense they're going to want to get some divine intervention. So oftentimes you will see people who claim a religious background. I'm not prepared to try and judge whether that's authentic or not. I'm not prepared to sift through and say, all right, I got this money, I got this food. Are you a Christian? Well, not really. Give me this back. This doesn't apply to you. No, I'm not prepared to do that, because my giving in the name of Jesus may be what helps motivate them. Hey, here you go, man. God loves you. Really? It sure doesn't feel like it. Well, I can understand why you might think that. Can we talk about that a little bit? There may be an opening there. Don't know. But if I understand your question correctly, Don, and I do understand that this is on a delay, that this is specifically talking about those who belong to him, because Jesus said, whatever you did to the least of these brothers of mine. And in this particular situation, I do not believe this verse is gender specific, which other translations said, whatever you've done to the brethren, which is like the brotherhood, the fraternity, which, as we know, fraternities can have men and women. It's not gender specific. I made a big deal about things being gender specific last week. This is not gender specific. So men and women, those who are in need, this is one of the ways that we can give. I got a lot more verses. Let me know what your thoughts are on this before we jump into the other verses.
Miss Pamela Campbell said it's more about meeting needs of adding to your crown.
All right, so I don't think you guys could probably hear Anastasia, but she is drawing my attention to what Miss Pam McCampbell is saying on Facebook, where she says it's more about meeting needs than adding to your crown. 100% true, 100%. Thank you, baby girl, for bringing that up. Any thoughts on this before we continue?
Yeah, this is Deb. I get caught sometimes thinking giving $1, like I usually give money. I gave up years ago deciding what people were going to do with money. I could thank Jim Rohn for that, for anybody who listens to Jim Rohn. But anyway, sometimes it's like if I don't have more than one single, I choose to drive by. So thanks for this conversation, Anthony, because it's very convicting, because it really doesn't matter.
Good stuff. I definitely agree.
It's the giving that counts, and it's for my benefit.
Absolutely. It is. We benefit
That's what
greatly.
I'm told to do.
Say that again, please.
I said, that's what I'm told to do. I'm not commanded to question what he's going to do. That's his choice, because I have my choice to give or not to give. And I'm told to give.
Absolutely right. Yes, my
This,
love.
this,
My
this
wife,
whole
if you got something she
just
wants to
one
share.
more word. This whole conversation has been very enlightening for me, or moving, as it might be.
Yeah, moving for me too, brother. All right, love, what's on your mind?
I really like what the last things you were saying, because I think sometimes as Christians, we get it twisted that if we are blessed in the way we feel we need to be blessed, like we have money, we have a house, then we are doing the things that we need to do with God, because clearly he's blessing us. Therefore, if someone doesn't have those things, well, it's kind of their fault, or they're in the wrong somehow. And I'm just reminded of the verse when it said, like, God doesn't look at the things man looks at, it's the heart. And we can't see someone's heart. And you can have the best house, the best stuff, and have the wrong heart. And you can have nothing in a worldly standpoint and have a godly heart. So what everyone was saying, I completely agree with. It's not about trying to judge what they're going to do or end their position with God based on the limited perspective we have of where they are with him, or where they are when we see them.
Mm-hmm. So true, my love. So true. Here, let me grab the mic.
I actually also think that money is not even the primary thing. I think it's secondary in terms of giving. It's really about the convenience, the time, and the control of what it is. So I just wanted to say that too.
Oh, that's deep, and it's so true. This idea, money is the easiest thing to give. It's the easiest thing to give. So you're absolutely right, IT. It's not just about money. It's about meeting needs. And many of you guys are saying that very thing. It's about serving. It's about displaying the love of Christ. Because if someone thinks that God doesn't care about them, if someone thinks that God does not love them, now you may be thinking, that's ridiculous. Who would think that? Lots of people. Lots of people feel abandoned by God. They feel forsaken by God. This is one of the great causes for atheism. Well, if there's a God, where is he? He's not doing anything for me and for my circumstances right now. God clearly doesn't love me as much as he loves that guy driving the nice car. Now, where in the world would he get that idea? Where would a homeless person get that notion? Because that's the way we act as Christians. God loves us. Look at what he has blessed us with. Look at this house. Look at this car. My wife's pretty. My daughter's smart. Clearly, I'm blessed. God loves me. Ooh, you don't have those things that God gave me? You ain't living right.
Wow.
That's terrible. We've been pushing that narrative. The Pharisees used to think that. Remember, even the apostles, they asked Jesus, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born this way? So if you don't have blessings, people tend to treat you as though you're not spiritual, as though you're less than. So just given that time, investing those efforts can make a huge difference in displaying the love of Christ. I see my daughter coming up. What's on your mind, my sweet girl?
Two things. Number one, Miss Daisha wrote, what does the scripture mean that says, I've never seen the righteous begging for bread?
Okay, great. What's the other thing, love?
Miss Pam McCampbell wrote, if you have difficulty giving cash, you can always carry gift cards for fast food or the grocery store. My son convicted me about passing up people, and we came up with bags of snacks, water bottles, and other necessities that are helpful. And then Miss Daisha wrote Psalms 37, verse 29 for her thing that says, I've never seen the righteous begging for bread.
All right, could you guys hear all of that?
Yes, thank you, baby girl.
All right, so we're going to get into that, Daisha. That's a very good question, a very good topic we need to talk about. I want to back up, actually not back up, I want to move forward a little bit. And by the way, I see the Shelton's trying to join. Looks like they're having maybe some issues. Jeremy, feel free to text me or post it up on Facebook if you can't get on at all. We've been talking about giving. We ain't even got to the church building. We haven't gotten to an institution. We haven't gotten to an organization yet. Think about all of this stuff we're discussing as you're driving. You're on the way to your job. You're on the way to your formal worship service. We haven't even gotten to the institution of the church and giving in that regard. We haven't even gotten there yet. We're going to get there now because this still matters with all the stuff we're discussing. So we're talking about money. We're talking about giving. We're talking about serving homeless people. We're talking about serving those who are in need. Now, sometimes someone in need might be the neighbor who just got out of the hospital and they got a mountain of medical bills they're dealing with. So when you come through with that plate of food, that casserole, that thing of brownies, with the icing on top that you're really good at making, that's a way to serve. That's a way to give. That's a way to be a blessing. But I want to draw your attention to some Old Testament again. I want to specifically draw your attention to Malachi. You know the book of Malachi because it keeps coming up almost every time somebody's doing communion and it's time to pass the collection plate. Right? So Malachi chapter 3, I'll pick it up in verse 6. We're really going to focus on verse 10, but let's look at verse 6 first. You guys with me? Malachi chapter 3. God says, I, the Lord, do not change, so you, O descendants of Jacob, are not destroyed. Okay, there's so much to unpack in that. We can't get all the way into it. But look at what he says. I, the Lord, do not change. Which means what? What's important then is important now. Unless he gives you something explicit, like I want you to worship in this way. I want animal sacrifices. Okay, now Jesus is the ultimate animal. Jesus is the ultimate sacrifice. Excuse me. Definitely don't want to say that wrong. First was about animal sacrifices, which were important. Now it's not about that. It's about Jesus, the ultimate sacrifice. All of that was just a shadow, but God doesn't change. What's important then is important now. He says, by the way, I'm that way so I don't destroy you. That's to your benefit. So keep that in mind. Be glad the Lord doesn't change. Verse 7, ever since the time of your forefathers, you have turned away from my decrees and have not kept them. He is bringing up a very specific accusation. Now watch what he does here. He says, return to me and I will return to you, says the Lord Almighty. But you ask, how are we to return? They've done something they weren't supposed to be doing. They aren't doing something they are supposed to be doing. And so the question is, well, how do we get this right? How do we return? Here's the issue. God says, will a man rob God? Now that sounds crazy. How are you going to rob God? Will a man rob God? Are you crazy? Why would you even try? Will a man rob God? Yet you rob me. Whoa. Take note. This is a big deal. God says, you are robbing me. That's a big deal. But you ask, how do we rob you? In tithes and offerings. You are under a curse. The whole nation of you, because you are robbing me. The whole nation of Israel was under a curse because they were robbing God. They were robbing him. And God says, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse that there may be food in my house. Very specifically, these people were commanded to give to the work of the temple. Now, we don't have temples nowadays. No, God wants you to give. You're commanded to give. It's not so much about the temple, but to give to the work of the Lord. And he says, you're robbing me. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse that there may be food in my house. Here's the part we like. Here's the payoff. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that you will not have room enough for it. God says, test me in this. You don't read that very often. You know what you read very often? Don't test the Lord. Do not put the Lord your God to the test. Don't do it. God says, test me in this. Here's a green light. Try it and see what happens. If you give, see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that you will not have room enough for it. Now, some of you are already hearing this going, well, I've given to the Lord and I don't have the floodgates of heaven that have been open on me. But yet you got a closet full of clothes.
Hey, brother. I want to
Let me get in.
apologize.
Hold on just a minute. We're going to get in. It's going to get in just a minute. Because this is your topic, by the way, Marco. So I definitely want to hear you.
Yeah.
But let's recognize when we're blessed. Let's recognize that when we have clothes that won't fit in the closet and we got boxes and we got storage units to hold our stuff because the house isn't big enough to hold the stuff, because the closet isn't big enough to hold the stuff, you are blessed. God has poured out blessings on you. Now, are you satisfied? Is it enough? Probably not, because you're human. And human nature says, I never have enough. But God is blessing, and he is blessing richly. So I will be quiet. Marco, definitely want to hear what you got to say.
First of all, I want to apologize. I was, somebody had called me and I tried to, try to mute it, and it actually answered.
It's all good, bro.
So I didn't get those 2 minutes before you said Malachi 3 verses chapter 7 or whatever that difference is. And maybe afterwards you could or I'll look at the video later and see what I missed. But yes, this is something that's very important. I think, like I said, I wanted to, because I want to give to the Lord. I want to really, 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 really give to the Lord in any and every way possible. It's a desire that I have from the bottom of my heart. I've been blessed with so many people that have poured onto me, that have made me the man that I am today. And I just want to reciprocate that because I love them, not because I feel like there's an obligation, because there isn't. It's just really out of love. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But I really want to also understand how to give wholeheartedly, because I feel like people just set a number, and they say, I'm gonna tithe, like 10%, to the Lord, and that's it, and they'll check mark that, and I just have a feeling that's not what it's all about. It's not about tithings and offerings in like a certain percentage, whatever and that's it, and just put it on auto pay or something. I feel like it's a little bit deeper. It involves what you just said, based off of Matthew 25, and because I believe that if we do, give to the Lord, a lot of our problems will get solved. And I think we'll have the eyes for Jesus. I think we'll be able to um, understand a lot more. Understand that we're just stewards.
That's so true, Marco. We are just stewards, and a steward is someone who's responsible for taking care of the possessions of someone greater than them. Think about it like a bank teller, almost like someone who I'm simply working for the owner. I'm just a tenant here. The things that I've been blessed with have been given to me so that I can do the work that God has called me to do. Now, we are often about to run out of time, and I see the chat that IT is bringing up. We still need to go with what Daesh talked about as well. So, matter of fact, let's address Daesh's question. Over in, and I had it up a minute ago. I've never seen the righteous beg bread. I believe that was Psalms. Daesh put it in the thing, right? Where'd it go? I've never seen the righteous beg bread. I will find it for you real quick. Bear with just a second.
In the meantime, brother, while you find that, I wanna also go over how to give to the Lord. Is there a certain percentage? Is there a certain um, is it based off of weekly pay? Like whatever you do, you receive when you do it. When you offer to the Lord. I guess that's what it's called. Is it like based off your weekly pay, your yearly pay? Is it like, what is it? Exactly. What does he expect? Because every Sunday, a lot of people, when they go give to the Lord, they're like, man, should I, is it, they probably don't need that or something. Maybe I could give it to the poor. Maybe I could give it to somebody. The church don't need this money. Maybe I could give it to my cousin that might need. Which is good. But how do we differentiate between that kind of giving and the giving to the to the, I guess, quote unquote, the temple, or which one is more important in that aspect?
Okay, great question. So let's get into that. We got a couple things. We're going to hit them relatively quickly. The verse that Daesh is bringing up, I've heard it a lot as well. And this is in the book of Psalms. So I believe this particular one is written by David. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. David says in Psalm chapter 37, starting in verse 24, he says, though he falls, he will not be overwhelmed, for the Lord is holding his hand. Okay, keep this in context. David says, I once was young, and now I'm old, yet never have I seen the righteous abandoned or their children begging for bread. Who's talking? David. Okay. He said, here's what I've seen. Now I ask you, especially if you were once young and now you're old, have you ever seen the righteous begging for bread? Have you?
Yes.
Yeah, be real now. Come on in. Have you seen the righteous? Have you seen people that you know? Have you, let's get real for a minute, have you Been in a situation where you say, you know what, I'm doing all I can to serve the Lord, but I don't know how I'm gonna make these ends meet.
Yes, sir.
You ever been in a family where, you know, you come home from school and it's dark and flipping that switch doesn't make a difference? This verse is not saying the righteous will never suffer. This verse is not saying, you know, thus saith the Lord, that if you are right before me, you will not be hungry. Sometimes we try to look at it that way, though. So David is making observation from his own life. He's saying, you know what, here's some of the things. And are there some good Christian principles in this? Absolutely. But please keep in mind that the Psalms and the Proverbs are not promises. They are not, same thing, train up a child in the way they should go. When they're old, they will not depart from it. You see some Christians really get twisted up over that. Because when a Christian who grew up attending church graduates high school and loses their mind, they may or may not find it. Didn't you train up that child in the way they should go? What happened? It's a good proverb. It's a principle. It makes sense. And this is what you should expect. Like when you plant a tree and you water it and you give it sunshine, it's supposed to grow. Does that mean they will always grow? No. So this is not a promise from the Lord. These are wise sayings that line up with how God has made the world to work. If you make wise decisions, you can expect better things to happen than if you make foolish decisions. Psalms and Proverbs talks about the difference between wisdom and a fool. Have you ever seen a fool get rich? Yeah, it does happen. Now, oftentimes they don't stay rich. Have you ever seen wise people who are broke? Yeah, it does happen. The principles, the Proverbs, the Psalms are still true. They still line up. Most of the time, the righteous are not begging for bread. And one of the ways we can keep the righteous from begging for bread is by me doing something about it. You see a need, you go meet the need. Not the Lord just going to drop some food from the sky. He's going to send some ravens to feed this person like he did Elijah. As long as I'm here, as long as you're here, we're supposed to meet those needs. So I want to keep going because there's so much stuff going on. We talk about some institutionalized giving. We see in Acts chapter 2, the people gave. They sold possessions even and gave to one another as there were needs. This is right after Acts chapter 2, verse 38. We see the believers meeting together, having everything in common. We see Acts chapter 4, verse 34. Now check this out. The sharing among the believers. Acts chapter 4, verse 34 says, there were no needy ones among them, because those who owned lands or houses would sell their property, bring the proceeds from the sales, and lay them at the apostles' feet for distribution to anyone as he had need. Now, this lines up much more with giving to the church, to lay this before the feet of the apostles. We have taken a tradition from this to lay the offering before the feet of the elders, that they will distribute it to any who have need, because it's their responsibility to know who has need, who would be blessed and who would benefit from this. So when we talk about institutionalized giving, how much were they giving? Old Testament, there was a command to give a tithe, and a tithe directly translates to 10%. And if you're like me, I'm an engineer. I want some numbers. I want some cold hard facts. 10%, that's where we're starting. Done. Coming up. Gross or net? He didn't say. Oh man. Well, if I'm going to give in a way where I want God to bless me, do I want him to bless me on the gross or on the net? And that's what I use to determine what I'm going to give. I'm going to give God 10% of my take home. Is that what I want him to bless me on? Mm-mm. Do you? No, Lord, don't bless me on take home pay, because the tax man already got his. So I want to try and give God based upon what he's given me. And that's the gross. Now, this was a guideline. This is where it started for the Jewish people. And if you look more and more into it, they gave a whole lot more. They were commanded to give a whole lot more. Look at what was going on in the first century. People were selling property. How much is a piece of land? How much does a house go for nowadays? Hundreds of thousands of dollars? Let that sink in. It ain't just about putting a 10 in the collection plate. These people were selling property. Now, of course, it wasn't $100,000 back then because of all the inflation, but inflation just means that's what equals it out. So if you think, okay, a house, a plot of land, whether it be hunting land or whatever, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in our society. It would have been the equivalent of the same thing in their society. We're talking big money. They were selling property and giving to the apostles so that these needs could be distributed. So there's our example. This is why we give. This is why we want to meet those needs. That's the opportunity we have, and God will bless us. That's not why we do it, but that can be part of the reason, right? Like, we're not doing it to be selfish, but we're doing it to be obedient. I think there were some other things that I needed to address. How am I doing? Facebook comments?
Are you going to talk about what IT wrote, or did I miss it?
What did IT write? Because he did bring up some good stuff.
He wrote about, like, how do we, well, he can correct me, but how do we balance, or how do we account for, if we're supporting charitable organizations? Is that over and above, or does that count toward?
Okay, so great question. We saw that in, and I'm a little hesitant to do this, but we saw in the book of Malachi, there was a requirement they had to bring the money into the storehouse, tithes and offerings. There was a command. They were not obeying that command. They were basically just doing other stuff. We know that Jesus confronted the Pharisees, and let me hit this for you real quick, and hopefully it'll help answer the question. The hypocrisy of the Pharisees, they were supposed to honor their father and mother, and they weren't. Let's see. I'm gonna need to find the verse where Jesus says the Pharisees nullify the law by not giving to their parents. Let's see if I can find that verse real quick. I think I want Mark chapter 7. There's a whole lot of verses here. I think verses 1 through 23. So I'm not prepared to get into all of that, but let me flip over here real quick. Mark chapter 7, and hopefully this has to do with what IT is saying and what Marco's bringing up, because sometimes you may know of a need. Hey, I got a family member who is struggling right now. What am I going to do to help meet that need? Let's look at Mark chapter 7, verse 9, because there is a responsibility. And I know we're getting towards the end of our time here, but Mark chapter 7, verse 9 says, "You have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions. For Moses said, honor your father and mother, and anyone who curses his father or mother must be put to death. But you say that if a man says to his father or mother, whatever help you might have otherwise received from me is Corban." What's Corban? That is a gift devoted to God. Then you no longer let him do anything for his father or mother. And this is one of the verses I was sharing with my sweet, sweet daughter just the other day, that there is a biblical mandate to financially support your parents. So yeah, quit sighing heavily. There's a biblical mandate to support your parents and make sure that they're taken care of, especially in their old age. And the Pharisees, who were definitely not like Jesus, and I'm telling my daughter, you definitely don't want to be like the Pharisees, do you? So you should definitely be planning on buying daddy stuff and giving him money on a regular basis when you get your job, trying to raise her up right. She was like, show me the verse, daddy. This is the verse, baby girl, all right? But there was a command to honor your father and mother. That meant pay up. That meant take care of them, not just, hey, you're good, thanks, mom and dad. Honor them by making sure they have what they need. Sometimes that is straight up financial. He says, you set aside that and you say, well, I'm just going to give that to God instead. That was not okay. So there was God's money, and there was money you're supposed to be doing with other stuff. You're supposed to be helping other people. So if you say, hey, you know what, I got money I can either be putting in the collection plate, or I can give it to my family member who may be in need. I trust that you can use the Holy Spirit's wisdom to decide how to do that. I also suggest that if and when you can do both, and trust that God will bless you. We don't like to talk about sacrificial giving, That's uncomfortable. I like to give of my excess. I know I got this much. I'm going to give God this 10% because I'm going to be all right. I've already budgeted this stuff in here. And so I can do that of my own power. But that's not what God's called us to do. Give outside of that. Think about the widow. When she put in 2 copper coins, the widow's mite, if you guys will recall. What percentage was that when she put it in the plate?
All of it. 100%.
That was 100%. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. And Jesus noticed. When you give, especially if it's sacrificial giving, Jesus notices. Now, what happened after that? Did the Lord open up the floodgates and, she went home and she had all the gold and all the money she needed? We don't know. But we do know that God saw it. And he has not only the ability, but he has the desire to provide for his people.
I thought, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, brother.
I thought Marcos, his comment on giving is just interesting, was giving electronically, setting something on auto pay and then just letting it go. I thought it was an interesting comment just because I think we can almost, I don't know if I'm necessarily ready to jump into this, but almost trivialize like it's so nonchalant that I can just set it and forget about it. Does that make sense? It's almost like a mindset that, and I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it was an interesting point that he brought up, set it to auto pay and I'm done. You know what I mean? So that's all I wanted to comment on. I thought it was one that made me think. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, let me ask you this. Because there's multiple types of people, multiple ways of looking at this. For me, I tend to forget spending money on things that I don't necessarily want to spend money on. It benefits me to set up auto pay for the lights. It benefits me to set up auto pay for, the whatever the bills, the utilities, because these are things that are important. These are things that need to get paid. I want to guarantee they get paid. I don't want to forget. When I do not purpose it ahead of time to give to the Lord, I tend to forget. Week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Oh goodness, a month has gone by. I failed to forget. I'm sorry. I failed to give. I've forgotten. It's important. I have the opportunity to set up some auto pay on other things. And because it's important, that's why I do it for those other things. So if you're saying, you know what, every Sunday morning, I want to put that in the plate as my service to the Lord. It's Lord, I love you. Boom, I want to do this. It's like a love letter to God. And if I'm sending my wife a love letter, if I'm writing something, I want to be present. I want to think about it. I don't want to set up an auto-generated thing for that. That may be the way you look at it. You may say, you know what, this is a practical and pragmatic thing. This is money belongs to the Lord. And I want to guarantee that he gets his money. I want to guarantee that my finances are in submission to him. So I don't want to leave this to chance. I don't want to leave this, give myself an opportunity to mess this up. So you may want to set it to auto pay. Do what God has placed on your heart. I want to hit you with this verse. As we start to run out of time, I see my baby girl's over here. I want to hit you with this verse before she tells us what's on her mind. Are you telling us what's in Facebook? All right, I will try and look and see what's in Facebook as well. But let us look here. And this is one of the motivations I want to leave you with. Luke chapter 6. Luke chapter 6. I definitely want to focus on verse 38. Jesus gives us some wonderful, powerful words in Luke chapter 6. We like to focus on verse 37. Non-Christians love Luke chapter 6, verse 37, because this is often the Christian repellent. This is the talisman to ward off meddling Christians. So for those of you who are not Christians and you like this verse already, it says, do not judge and you will not be judged. You ever hear that? Hey, just want to tell you, you're not living your life. Hey, the Bible says don't judge. Don't judge me. This is where they're getting that from. Do not judge and you will not be judged. Do not condemn and you will not be condemned. Forgive and you will be forgiven. Verse 38 is what we want to look at. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will it be poured in your lap. For with the same measure you use, it will be measured to you. Now, this is a good part of where you should plant your biblical thinking on giving. Let it grow in the soil of this verse. Give, and it will be given to you. How much? How much you want to be blessed. Give, and it will be given to you. Well, is that 10%, 25%? How much do you want to be blessed? So when he says measure, I want you to think of a measuring cup. I want you to think of a scoop. I'm not the first person to come up with this. I've heard plenty of preachers talk about it. When you give to someone, when you have your measuring scoop, think about you being blessed with a bag of grain, a bag of goods, a bag of gold. And someone says, hey man, I really need some help. I really need a blessing. We'll just use this for an example. All right, this is my scoop. I reach in, here's my scoop, and I pour them out a blessing. All right. God says, hey, I want to bless you. Give me your scoop. This scoop, hold on, Lord, I got a bigger one. No. Give me the same scoop you've been using to bless other people. I'm going to use your scoop to bless you. The same measure. Think of this as a measure. The same measure you use, I will use to bless you. Now it's going to be full. It's going to be shaken together. Think about potato chips. This one gets me. Bag of potato chips. The bag is this big. The bag is this full. Now they tell you, oh, you know, there's some air in here to keep the things from getting crushed, but it just don't feel right in my soul to open up that bag and it not be full. God's not going to give you a half empty bag of chips. Thank you, baby girl. He's not going to give you a half empty bag of chips. If this is your bag, if this is your measure, give it to me. I'm going to fill it up. I'm going to shake it together so it'll settle all in there. Think about that. God says, I'm going to settle your blessing in. It's going to be a good measure. I'm going to pack it down and it's going to be running over. It's going to be as full as I can make it, but I'm using your measure. Now, here we go. I got a spoon right here too. So when you give to people, do you use the spoon? Hey, homeless dude on the side of the road, I think I got $1. Here you go. By the way, that's got milk on it. Here you go, homeless person. Here's a little spoon. I'm going to sprinkle this out on you. I'm going to bless you. God says, give me that spoon. I want to bless you. Lord, don't use this. Here, use this. No. If you're not using this to bless him, I'm not using this to bless you. If you're using this to be a blessing to others, if you say, okay, it's time to give it to the Lord, I'm gonna write my check to the church. This is the spoon I'm gonna use. God says, then give me the spoon when it's time to bless you. So you get to decide. Now I know that's not always what I want to hear. I want some cold hard numbers. And 10% is a great place to start. But if you want God to bless you on that 10%, or do you want God to bless you on that 30%, that 40%? Whoa, we're talking crazy now. Same measure you use will be measured to you. There's some stuff on Facebook. I'm pretty much out of time. Let me hit the Facebook stuff and then we'll wrap it up. All right. Dates wants to know what it means to live righteously, to train our children righteously. We'll talk like you don't know, Daesh, all them overachieving children you got. I know you want us to get into it, but yeah, next week. Do what you've been doing, Daesh. All them well-behaved kids you got over there. There's some other comments that I may have missed. This is a great topic, Marco, because money matters. It matters to God what we do with it. The Bible says, where your heart is, there your treasure will be also. So we must keep that in mind. Hey, I want to give my treasure to the work of the Lord. Why? Because my heart's going to follow that. I want to make sure that I'm doing what God's called me to do because my heart will follow what I treasure. That's my time. That's my money. That's my resources. That's the efforts I put into it. It's also my money. So it's a big topic, Marco. You let me know, man. How do we do? Do we need to talk about this more next week?
I like what you said about the gross pay versus the net pay. That was that was deep. A lot of people don't even want to talk about that, but that gross pay versus that net pay is something, that sacrificial giving. I you know, all that stuff. I wanted to touch base on that for sure, because and we covered for the most part everything that I was really wanting to do. For me personally, I wanted to understand how to, budget this, as I'm getting, more financially, free in my life, as an adult growing up, and being smarter. 'Cause I really want to, help people as much as I can. And I wanted to, I want to learn to give to the Lord, and, as much as I can in any way that I can. So I just want to learn how to do that the right way and the best way possible, because I want to be like Abel. I want to be like David. I want to be like, all these and people like, real life people, that right here that are present of this day that I've had witnessed of being such givers. And so with that being said, I think we got to learn how to administer a lot of what we do, and it's very important. Money is very important, and if we learn how to do that right, I think God calls us to be prepared to understand. It makes it harder for us, because but it's a test, and it kind of reminds me of what in Revelation, how everybody's feet are bronzed in like it's been through the fire,
Yeah.
and that's a test. This is a big test. So I really want to be that guy with the bronze feet, being tested. So or I guess that's what in Spanish it sounds like it's bronze, but it may be amber or something. I don't know. But yeah, I thank you for that, brother. I really learned a lot. I would like to just specify, would you budget the money that you give weekly or monthly from your gross?
You receive it.
That's a great question. And I think it depends a lot on how you get paid. If you get paid monthly, it makes sense, at least from my practical way of thinking about it, to do it monthly. If I get paid weekly or bi-weekly, I try to budget it based upon when it's coming in, make sure God gets his money, and as I'm getting mine.
Good. Okay, so basically, if you get paid monthly, you just kind of get an idea, and you break it down 4 times for the month, and you give every week your whatever you want to give. Correct?
That's definitely a good way to do it. Or if you say, I want to just I give once a month. I get paid once a month. I give once a month. That's up to you. And you may talk also to your church, to the places that you are giving, and they may say, you know what, it would help us budgetary wise to if you broke that up and gave it to us once a week. But they say, it doesn't matter. It's all good either way.
Okay, that's good.
All right, guys. Well, I'm all out of time. I've made a habit of going over. I want to correct that habit. So thank you for bearing with me. Lord willing, we will try to keep this within an hour. Sometimes it gets to overflowing. So we want to make sure the Spirit has room to lead. I also want to make sure that I start on time and probably have a more rapid start instead of kind of the slow ramp up. Next week, plan on just jumping right in and hitting the ground running. So thank you guys so much for being here. I've been encouraged. I hope that you have been encouraged, and God willing, we will do this again next week. I look forward to seeing you all then.